Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. My name is Andy Green, and with me is...
Felix Schultz.
How you going?
Yeah, still a bit weird with the old intros. I've had a... It's been... Maybe it's... Have I always been weird with the intros?
You've always been very, very weird. It's that's why people listen.
It's part of my charm. Hey, Andy, guess who's back? We have got... Back again.
Back again.
John Reardon with his friends. And his friends are more Patek, more vintage, and more awesome watch content. I'm very excited for this, Andy.
Yeah, he was a great guy to talk to. He's super knowledgeable. He's definitely a person who you kind of leave a conversation feeling a little bit inadequate about your own knowledge on certain subjects like vintage Patek. But, what a great chat. Everything from Patek desk clocks to pocket watches to, his time working for the brand. Really, really cool guy to talk to.
And of course, we should not forget, he's back because a few weeks ago we spoke to him about the 5711 largely, and this is part 2. So if you haven't heard part 1, it's essential listening.
Go listen.
Listen to this, obviously. You're listening to it now, but go back and then listen to the first.
Go back, open your iPod, open your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star review on your iPod device when you're listening. Maybe do a social post, tagging us, showing all your mates that you listen to OT the podcast. Listen to John Reardon part 1, which you'll get through and you'll be all educated on the 5711, I should say. And then come back and listen to this part 2.
Or you could just do whatever you want to do.
But still 5-star reviews, Felix. Very important.
Before we get to reading all our 5-star reviews, Andy, what have you been up to?
Just shopping, really. All those 5-star reviews allow us to, live a luxurious lifestyle and treat ourselves occasionally. So I bought I got some rubber straps for the watch collection. I bought 3 from Horus. You know Horus?
Is Horus a person? Egyptian
Horus
god
straps.
of the sun? Oh, Horus straps. Yes. No.
Horus straps.
They do like Rolex straps, yeah? Mostly?
Rolex, AP, IWC, Tudor, everything. The AP, very famous for sort of the Rolex and obviously Hublot and AP because they can kind of get those end links right, even if it's sort of an integrated strap like you get on, a lot of the Royal Oak offshores, for example.
Hey.
Yeah, and they've been around for probably quite a long time. I think very early kind of watch Instagram, they've always had a presence.
Did you go conservative or funky? Because they've got some funky.
Okay. So I bought 3.
Okay.
First one, all black, naturally.
Conservative.
Goes with everything.
Hey,
then I went...
What watch is this going on?
Not telling you. Maybe you can figure it out from the colour schemes. Maybe you can't. Maybe I have a new watch I haven't told you about.
I'd be very upset if that was the case.
So I went all black because it goes with everything. Then I went forest green, which I thought, I like it. It's a darker green, naturally, as forest green tends to be. And then the third one, which I'm very excited for.
Tell me.
Want to know what it is?
Flamingo
pink. Flamingo pink.
Does it live up to the name?
I'll send you a link. It's pretty cool. It kind of looks like flamingo pink. I believe Horus are based out of Florida. So that makes a bit of sense on brand. But nice. I'm excited because I love rubber straps. Wow. Without giving them too much of a plug, I believe they ship FedEx priority, so it should hopefully be here by the time this episode comes out. Give them a week, guys, and if it's not,
well,
founded in 2014, so they've been around 7 years. Wow.
We'll look out for the coy secret Instagram posts. Oh, what watch is this? Oh, got a new watch. Who knows?
Yeah, delivery dates can be very exciting. What have you been up to, Felix?
A few things. I don't know if we talked about it last time, but I went up to Sydney and I popped in to see Grand Seiko and I saw one of their new watches there, the Silver Birch. Are you familiar with it?
Damn. Yeah, how was it?
Really nice. So it's sort of... It's a regular production watch, and it's got the new 9SA5 movement, which is their sort of whiz-bang latest and greatest caliber. But so the dial and the movement are what's sort of getting all the because it's like very snowflake-esque in its vibes, but it's a automatic, all that sort of stuff. It's not. They were great. Don't get me wrong, but it's not what really impressed me about the watch. Do you want to know what impressed me about the watch? The case. The case, Andy. It's a new case.
Oh, we've been talking about this.
They call it Series 9, the Series 9 design, I think. And so you can see it, if you pull up a picture, you can see the thicker hour hand, and like the 12 o'clock marker has changed.
That is a fat hour hand.
Mm-hmm. As is the 12. So they're doing it for, more legibility, more beautiful reflection of light and all that sort of grand Seiko jazz. But the case profile is a lot more sophisticated. I think like there's sort of a bit more nuance to it. And for me, like, watches are all about the cases. Some people like a beautiful dial, some people like the movement. I like a case. That's the thing that I'm drawn to, and I'm very into it.
Yes, I'm reading about it now. It's got a wide lugs and a low center of gravity.
Sounds familiar.
80 hours power reserve.
But let's not get too in the weeds.
So it's 40 millimeters. 40 millimeters, 11.7 millimeters thick. I'm just nerding out on it.
Yeah, it's cool. But it's the sort of
cool
thing that really translates IRL. Like, you can look at the specs and go, oh, that feels nice. But sometimes you can also get that and go, oh, that's a bit weird. Okay. But this looks and feels really, really nice on the wrist, and an improvement, I think, from sort of earlier Grand Seiko cases. But it's not the only. I've got some preemptive watch news.
Okay. Getting ahead of yourself?
Yeah, I am, because I know it's happening. I'm seeing and I'm very excited about it, so I'm going to talk about it. The new Blancpain No Rad 50 Fathoms.
Damn.
You familiar with this one?
Yeah, of course.
What do you think of it?
I'm a sucker. I'm
You
a sucker
like
for
it?
No Rad. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I had a mate ask me if he should get one. Did
you have?
Because I think it's
was he offered one?
limited. Yeah, he got offered one. They said, we've got one. If you want it, it's yours. He's a pretty good customer of his dealer. So
Did he say yes?
He's like, oh gee, it's a fair bit of money. Traditionally wouldn't go for Blancpain. He's a big Rolex guy.
Sure.
If that paints the picture. I said, mate, you've got to do it. If you like it and you've got the money, do it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the more special ones. Though I did some research on it. They've done one before, a reissue, back in like 2018. I want to say earlier. No, you're thinking they did a Tornik Rayville one with a similar water moisture thing. They did one in I think 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. But it was the big 50 fathom, so it was like a 45 mil case. It was super polished. And it just had the No Rad logo, whereas this is a much more vintage-inspired design. If you know what I
limited
mean.
to 500 pieces.
Yeah,
priced
I think it'd be very hard to get.
Retail price is $14,100 USD. You know what though?
What?
I can't fathom the resale price on these.
On that, what have you been into?
It's definitely rad.
Let's keep going. What's next? Move on.
Things we've been liking. I've got a good one.
What is it?
It's a watch. There's like anyone, there's a couple of dealers online that you just check maybe it's every morning, maybe it's every couple of mornings. That you just poke around, see what they've got, see what they've sold, see what's come in, dream, maybe buy something. But one guy who I check out a lot, and be interested to maybe hear if people want us to kind of get him on the podcast because he's been around a while. But Tropical Watch put up a lovely, lovely 1995 Rolex yellow gold Zenith Daytona, black dial, diamonds. So that's a reference 16528, priced at a lovely $36,550 US. So Felix, if you are struggling for a Christmas gift for me this year, do it.
I'll email Tropical Watch and ask for a high-res photo.
He takes very good photos. And side note, people will get this, but they put up lovely photos, and the branding was done by I think Scott Dadich. I think they're mates who does the abstract series. But I'm pretty sure that they take some of their case photos on like a silicon breast implant. So that's going to be my opening question when we get Jacek, the founder, on.
Okay.
Because if you click the link, you'll see what I mean. But it's I don't know what else it could be.
Maybe just a realistic recreation of a jellyfish.
Andy, they're jellyfish molds.
Yeah, that's
Have a
right.
look. What have you been liking?
Well, in the spirit of potential Christmas gifts, I've also spotted something that was to my fancy. And something, actually, no, it's unfair to say I spotted it because I think you sent it to me. And I've just jacked your, well, actually, no, it's was on Hypebeast, so everyone's seen it. Kith.
Oh, you know Hypebeast?
Sorry?
You know Hypebeast?
I'm familiar with them.
Oh, okay, cool.
I don't know what that means. Were you being rude?
No, I'm just joking about it. It's like, one of the world's biggest hyper-yes websites.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think we really needed to explain that. It's like, I read about something on Wikipedia. Have you heard of Wikipedia? Anyway, Kith and G-Shock, they have made their third collaborative union, and it is a very attractive / amazingly ugly, in the way that only G-Shock can get away with, watch. The GM6900, which is, I think, the same. Is it the same one that the Hodinkee Mayer one?
Yep,
was?
Same as the John Mayer for Hodinkee.
Looks a little different because it's a full metal case that has been rainbow treated. It's sort of got a rainbow ion plating, and it looks ridiculous. It looks like it's been dipped in oil. And it comes on a clear Kith strap just to sort of balance out the craziness of the watch head. $400. What do you think, Andy?
It's good. I love the case. It just gets me thinking, like, what if I could dip something? If I could rainbow treatment something in my life, what would it be?
Car.
But car would be sick. Oh, you could do that. You could do a wrap. Yeah, this is gonna be crazy. I imagine you can't get them right now.
I assume it's already gone.
Gone. Knowing Kith, everything sort of just goes wild. I love the story of Kith. So I think it's sweet. I think it's very, very sweet. And the GM6900 is a bit of an icon. So, yeah, it makes sense. But, Felix, speaking of G-Shock,
if you've listened to us before, you're probably aware that we're both big into our G-Shocks. Like any serious watch collectors, Felix and I own a bunch that we've collected over the years. And G-Shock is a brand that seems to pop up every other week. You might remember, our guests sharing their love for the brands. If I think recently, Sean Stockman from Boys to Men or Adam Craniotes from Red Bar. And that's just a few examples. Today, though, thanks to G-Shock, we're trying out some watches from their MTG line.
Andy, I've always wanted to know, what is an MTG?
Get ready, it's a bit of a tongue twister. It's one of the premium collections in the G-Shock family, and it stands for Metal Twister G-Shock, which should really give you a sense of what we're playing with here. Stainless steel cases and bracelets.
Absolutely. So the one I'm not wearing it now because I took it off to look at it. The one I've got is the fully black ion-plated number with a Bordeaux bezel, which you might call purpley red, Andy.
Oh, fancy. And the one I've been rocking is the polished stainless steel with a black ion-plated bezel. In some ways, though, the steel is part of the appeal. They come with a carbon core guard structure for better shock resistance, sapphire crystal, 200 meters of water resistance, and so many other functions, like a second time zone, calendar, alarm solar power, and even an LED light.
I live in for that LED light, Andy. I press it all the time, and thank God it's solar, because otherwise I'd be needing a new battery every other month. But you know what else I really like about it? The smartphone app. I have been through the drama before with the G-Shock of trying to change a function, like change the date or something like that. And I can tell you that flicking through that tiny, tiny G-Shock manual with my German-sized fingers is not something that comes easily. With the G-Shock connected app, it's a lot more user-friendly. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, it sure is. How have you found it on the wrist?
Solid. I'm not going to lie, though. It's a big boy. It's 55.1 mil across by 51 tall by 15.9 mil high. Thanks, though, to that carbon core, it's not too heavy. So on the bracelet, it weighs in at 156 grams. For me, I think it's a good work watch. Even when I'm working at home, I can wear it comfortably. I don't have to worry about, sort of banging it into things, which does happen around the house. I'm a klutz. And there's a really sort of nice, pleasing sort of tactility and feel on the wrist. How have you found it, Andy?
Yeah, I agree. It is a little bit bigger, but it doesn't really have lugs, so I think that kind of takes a few millimeters off what you might expect. I've been wearing it around too, wearing it to the gym. Really, it's right at home. The polished steel fits in with the with the decorum. The black bezel looks really, really cool. And that 156 grams doesn't add a heap of weight, when I'm throwing around, a couple of 100 kilos on the deadlift bar.
You're not feeling it.
And the other thing I really tipped me over the edge. But what I do find is I'm someone at the gym who sort of puts their phone down and kind of forgets about it and then struggles to find it on the way out. And I've been using the Find My Phone feature through the which you set up through the app, and basically you can use the watch to set off 3 or 4 different tracks on your phone that just blast out until you stop it, and that has come in handy a few times.
True. Now, for all the reference fans out there, I know you've been waiting for this. I've been wearing the MTGB 2000BD-1A4, and Andy has been wearing the MTGB 2000D-1A. As you know, that's what we like to call them. The RRPs for those guys are 1749 and 1899 Australian dollars. We will link them up in the show notes. We'll link up some pics, all the specs, all that stuff. Or you could just head to g-shockaustralia.com.au for more. Then we've got to get back to that episode, Andy.
Let's get at it.
All right, Andy. We've got to get John Reardon on the hypothetical telephone, but heads up to you, because you might not be aware of this, and heads up to the listeners, because this was part 2. It might be a little bit of a harsh jump cut, because we're following on from the earlier chat, if you know what I mean.
So if you want to have a great intro for John Reardon, maybe head back to part 1 and re-listen to it.
God, don't forget to give us 5 stars on iTunes.
And we'll insert a telephone ring here just for effect's sake. Alrighty, well, look, what we're going to do now, John, is have a bit of a broader chat about Patek as a brand. In particular, vintage Patek. It's something that you are very, very passionate about. We've said it a few times. You've written the book, and it's really interesting because it is a fascinating brand for a lot of reasons, and I'm sure you'll tell us why. So what we want to do is I'll pass over to Felix, and we'll really hear about the love for Patek and where that specific sort of focus started for you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andy. So in doing some research for this, John, I might have listened to another podcast by another OT alumni, Jeremy Kirkland, and he asked a question that I'm going to paraphrase.
Okay.
Can you tell us the story about the first watch you ever consigned, and does it get any better than that watch that you got in some unusual circumstances?
Oh my gosh, now I have to line up my stories and make sure I get it straight.
Let's just say that it involves some unusual accommodation in New York.
Where's this going?
Of course. You just reminded me of another story that I never shared.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to tell 2 stories. One that happened in college, and then one that happened right immediately after college. And both of these stories, I guess, dovetailed to put me on my horological path. They're all, it all adds up. So I think it was junior year in college. I had a clock repair business on the side, and I was repairing clocks in my dormitory for clients. And I had the opportunity, because there's all these huge estates. I went to school in Rhode Island. Imagine the Newport estates from the Gilded Age. There were some amazing clocks that you can buy, and I bought this incredible black marble nested bell. It must have weighed about 60, 70 pound ornate 19th century clock with an unusual escapement. I couldn't afford it. It cost $350. So my roommates and I all pooled in to buy this clock. And at that time, it was very difficult to convince my flatmates to go for it, but they pulled it. I restored it and I consigned it to Sotheby's, and it ended up bringing, it was like $5,000 or $6,000. And when I doled out the proceeds to my roommates, I think I changed their lives forever, because it was a lot of money at that time. So I was able to recognize that there was treasures all around us, but you had to look in the most unexpected places, and that was an adventure finding that clock. So every piece that you look at in an auction house or even on the Collectability website, they all have these backstories of every single time that they changed hands, whether it was a gift from father to son, whether it was a financial transaction or something to celebrate. And And that's what's so much fun, because I look at anything I've ever sold and I remember the story. But I think you're hinting at the story of when I lived at the Priory in New York. Is that the one?
Yep.
So I, and on all of us watch guys, we do the same thing. You're always looking at people's wrist. We can't help it. And when I first moved to New York City to work at Sotheby's, I had the unusual, I guess we'll call it an honor and experience of living at a priory for my first year. Literally a part of a community of friars, and it was unusual is an understatement, but it was rather close to Sotheby's. It was on the Upper East Side and seemed very convenient and very affordable. I had no inclination to become a man of the cloth, but it was a roof over my head and 3 meals a day, which was unusual. And I remember at the one of the dinners, I looked over and one of the friars in his white friar robe was wearing a Patek Philippe Calatrava, and I started talking to him, and sure enough, it was a gift, and he consigned it, and we sold it at Sotheby's. Remember, I had indirect center seconds. It's amazing because you never know what life experiences will bring you your next watch. Whether you're a private collector, you just never know what you're going to see next, or if you're in the business like I am, we're always just looking no stone unturned.
It's always a gift, isn't it? It's always a gift.
So much fun.
that might explain why Patek. What drew you to this brand? I mean, it's not a entry level brand for a young sort of college kid to be buying and playing around with. So how did you kind of enter that realm, and why did you stay?
It was really during my time at Sotheby's that I was introduced to the world of Patek Philippe. I didn't grow up with a proper watch culture, we'll call it. I was fixing and buying and selling watches such as Walthams, Ingrams, Hamiltons, Elgins. The clocks I was working with were from my hometown and surrounding area in Connecticut, so not extremely valuable. But I was obsessed and appreciated every single bit of every single one of those pieces, and it was so much fun to learn about them. Now, once you're spoiled, it's the same as the first time that you fly and you're in coach. It's fun, it's amazing. You get a bag of peanuts if you're lucky, and a soda from the cart. But once you go into first class, you could never go back again. And that's the same thing that happened once I was exposed to Patek Philippe. I was just absolutely blown away by their technical beauty, their aesthetic beauty, the breadth of their history. And the more I dive deep, and still I feel the same way today. I'm like a kid in a candy store learning about this brand. I truly don't think there's any other company in the world that has such a breadth of production and a story, always trying to obtain to be number one. And they've made their share of mistakes. They've also had their share of home runs. And that storyline dating back to the 1830s is what captures my imagination. And I'm just as excited by a piece from the 1840s as I am by a watch that's being released currently, and that's what's so great about this brand. There's really something for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Now, you've sort of mentioned, that you started at Sotheby's, I believe, in 1997 or so. You were there at a pretty interesting time for the watch auction business, where it was sort of going from a fraction of the portfolios of these major auction houses to quite a significant chunk these days. But you were also there at a time when I think one of the most interesting watch auctions of recent times happened. The Henry Graves super complication that was sold, I think, in 99.
Yeah, December 2nd, 1999, a date I'll never forget.
Can you tell us what it was like to be there at that time, and why that sort of moment is held up as like a watershed for the auction business?
Sure. I think the first watershed moment I unfortunately missed, and that was the famous 1989 sale, April 9th, 1989, in Geneva, the Art of Patek Philippe. That sale really it kicked off modern watch collecting as we all know it. But little did I know I had the honor and pleasure of living history in 1999 in preparation of the Time Museum sale in New York, which was the good work of Darren Schnipper, who's still at Sotheby's. She's been in the watch and clock department since 1989. Sorry, rewind from she was there since the 1970s, 79. So she spearheaded this amazing collection, which was the most important horological museum in the world at that time, from Rockford, Illinois, the Time Museum collection, put together by a very interesting and brilliant character named Seth Atwood. And one of the pieces that he acquired was the famous Henry Graves super complication. And that I was tasked for writing the footnote and researching the history of that particular watch and writing the essays for the catalog. What a dream come true that was. So the estimate was 3 to 5 million. And I remember just obsessing over trying to find as much information as I could about Henry Graves Jr. and this unbelievable watch. And in short, I think we had 12 pages on that watch, which was rather unheard of at auction at that point in time. And it's brought to $12 million US at the end of the day, which was a record. Now, that's been since blown away. The watch has come back and brought double. But I'll never forget that day of and how that watch brought that extraordinary price.
Yeah, it's truly an amazing story, and it's wild. It's wild to think about that sort of cash. And I think that the Seth Atwood story is a one for another day. But what I think is worth talking to you about is we've talked about Nautilus, we've talked about the Aquanaut. There's so much more to Patek. Where do you think we should start?
Oh my goodness. I wish we can go decade by decade, starting in the 1830s. And
is that the way to do it, though?
It'd be so much fun. We'd need to do a whole series. So here's the Cliff Notes version. Collectability has been very obsessed, and a big part of my business is pocket watches. Because up until 1910, 1915, pocket watches it was the core business of Patek Philippe. The variety and different models that you can buy are more than hundreds, different variations and variables and complications. And I've been focusing a lot on minute repeaters because the price point at 5 to 10% of a modern wristwatch repeater is just unbelievable value to me. And the sound that these pocket watches make is so far superior to any repeater made today. Like I have this minute repeater split in my hand right now. It happens to be on my desk, and I don't know if the mic will pick it up, but this particular one is one of the loudest repeaters I've ever heard. It's this massive pocket watch, and I'll engage it now and see if we could listen.
That was amazing.
I truly hope that sound came through.
Do it again.
I can't tell what time it was because I wasn't paying enough attention. But
that was awesome.
It's like 4:55. The sound that these things throw out is just an acoustic masterpiece, and aesthetically they're beautiful. But when you look at the movements and how these were made, and you realize the fact that the people that made the gongs, the original alloys for these gongs, were all family secrets that have now lost to history. There's no repeaters that can be made today that will have a sound as attractive as that. And when you could buy these for $30,000-$40,000 US or less, to me that's just incredible value. And it comes back to the Nautilus. I look at a Nautilus that cost X, and I could buy 3 or 4X pocket watches of the highest quality, and that to me is value, and it's fun curating from the 19th century because there's such variety to choose from.
Absolutely. On the other side of the coin, what are some of the most popular misconceptions you hear around Patek?
That they're delicate, that they're fragile. I used to hear that they were perceived as just a men's brand or an older men's brand. I think a lot of that, thanks to their marketing and the great job the retailers have done around the world educating in the front lines, that is being quickly forgotten. I think people recognize Patek Philippe for what it is. Of course, they're being challenged by all fronts, namely by the independents and other particular brands that are taking shots at Patek Philippe left, right, and center. As it's tough to be number one. You're always going to have someone challenging you. And for sure, there are certain brands that have done an exceptional job on beating, shall I say, Patek Philippe in certain market segments.
Mm.
But there is no brand that has the breadth of production today or historically that could even hold a candle to what Patek Philippe has done in terms of the variety of types of timepieces, and that's it draws. I'm very attracted to it.
If I'm completely honest, I find it intimidating to like you're talking about centuries of history there, and it's a massively deep sort of area of knowledge, and there's sort of minutiae everywhere. And if you make a mistake, it can cost you, tens of thousands of dollars or whatever. How do you suggest that people who are maybe wanting to learn about vintage Patek, how do they get into it, and how do people separate the real information, the signal, from all the noise that surrounds it?
Uh, it's well, I would like to say it's simple, but maybe in a post-COVID universe, number one is get to know a watchmaker. Everyone needs a watchmaker in their life, and someone that can really show and explain to you the technical differences of the watches that you have, and it doesn't matter what brand, what make, or what price point. And the reason that's so important, not only because you could take care of any mechanical issues that may arise, is that he or she will be able to show you the differences of what makes your watch special. And it's magic when you see a Patek Philippe movement, even if it's a $5,000 pocket watch, and you start having that watch disassembled, and you could see and look at the balance with your own eyes. You could see how the edges of each of the steel components are just perfectly polished. You could compare if you have another watch of another make, and you can compare and contrast not only from the same period of time, but from across generations. That's the way to educate your eye and to learn. And I guess it's probably the same with the specialist in all different collecting segments. Once your mind is educated and you can compare and contrast, and you can't just know Patek, you need to know as much as possible about everybody. You're able to draw conclusions of what you're attracted to and what you want to buy. And I guess I'm just offering the way to like jump ahead of the line. And I could tell you, you could buy some of the best pieces of horological masterpieces ever made for under $10,000. Um, so despite what other brands are selling new for 40, 50, $60,000, I could find something, or not, you could find something that's from an earlier period that's of higher horological value that a watchmaker will have nothing but respect for. And that's why you need your watchmaker, because you need your own person to tell you and show you the differences of what quality really is. Otherwise, there's too much noise in the marketplace. Everyone's saying they have the greatest thing ever. You need to find the answer to that yourself.
I love it. Philosophical again. It's I love the passion that comes through with Patek, and it's the people are very passionate about brands like AP and obviously Rolex. The Patek passion that you have seems to make a lot more sense to me. What I want What I want to ask you is, being having that dealer side and sort of being so, paying so much attention to the auctions. One of our previous guests, who I'm sure you must know, Phil Toldano, otherwise known as Mr. Enthusiast, he's pretty
Yes.
into the old Beta 21 models. Firstly, can you tell us a bit more about these? Because I look at them and I love the aesthetic, I love the design, and then I look at the price tag, and I can't afford them. But can you explain what the Beta 21 model is and what's going on with that section of the market and what makes them special?
No, sure. By the way, I love his Instagram feed. His aesthetic and his pictures are second to none. And I think that what draws people to the Beta 21 is it's just such a quirky watch. It's so outside of the realm of what you'd expect from Patek Philippe. Recently, everybody's loving the 1970s aesthetic, and no watch is bigger, clunkier, and funkier from Patek Philippe than the Beta 21. The movement itself is so hideous, you have to love it. I mean, the Beta 21 caliber is not the most attractive thing to look at, but when you have it on your wrist and you feel the humming or the buzzing of that movement on your wrist all day, it's let's just say you notice when you take the watch off, it becomes part of you, and it's always in a giant chunk of gold. In these architectural cases are quite interesting with the dials. The bracelets, especially the cheese grater bracelet, as we call it, is something that's just so unique to Patek Philippe's history. So if you want to embrace the 1970s with one watch, the Beta 21 is the way to go. I reference 3587 or 3597. As a consequence, the prices are skyrocketing for these.
Can we blame Phil for that? Do you think we can call Phil out for just driving the prices up?
Oh, it's completely his fault. So
Yeah. Okay.
completely his fault for doing that, and I think they'll keep going up. But there's one other problem with these watches: the repair bill. When all Beta 21s, they're gonna have their moment where they're gonna have to go in for service. And in the past, especially when I worked at Patek Philippe, it was common to see repair bills in far excess of $10,000.
Wow.
That's because they didn't have the parts or components for the Beta 21. My understanding, and I speak from experience, you could now send one in for service and it's a couple $1,000s and it's quote normal. So the fear factor isn't there as it was in the past. But
Okay.
it's if you own one of these, you have to be aware it's
Because that purely
you're gonna
looks
have a
right.
cost.
Like the movement, the Beta 21, as you said, it's going to have its time where it needs an overhaul, but it's basically looks, right? It's not an amazing movement itself.
No, the movement's fascinating historically. It's so important.
Yeah.
But the level of hand finishing that we talk about in the world of Patek Philippe isn't quite there. It's the same as the 20 other companies. So a Beta 21 is essentially a Beta 21, but I think they're a fun thing to have on the wrist, and there aren't many out there that are in decent condition. So demand is high.
Yeah, so I mean, the last time I looked, the price was sort of anywhere from 20,000 US to 50,000-60,000 US, depending.
Yes, on the high end, that's exactly what people are transacting. So
yeah, interesting. Do you think that could be the next Patek boom, or is there going to be a different model that's sort of a little bit underappreciated, or that's been sleeping a little bit, that's going to really kind of get noticed?
That's a great question. I highly don't. I don't expect there'll be the next boom. Beta 21s won't be the next big thing, because you need to have volume in order to have a market. Look at the Daytona market, vintage and modern. I mean, there are a lot of watches out there. It's enough to be a market. It's enough to be driven upward. But the Beta 21 market is just too small. Like if everyone in the world wanted one, I mean, it would be over. The boom would be over in a day.
What is it then? What do you think it's going to be? What's the is it Calatravas?
The unexpected. Yeah, you just answered my the question. The unexpected boom that I've experienced over the last 6 months is in pocket watch collecting, and I've always been a big advocate. My friend and your former guest Eric Wind always laughed at me that I always said this is the year for pocket watches because it never seems to happen. But now, mark my words, it's happened. We're seeing prices in all the various online auctions for pocket watches, Patek Philippe pocket watches in particular, bringing really unexpected sky high prices, and people are starting to study them, compare them, and I actually think that there's now a future in the past. So I have a lot of hope for the pocket watch market, which is it's so interesting to me. But the part that makes me so excited, it's how it's becoming interesting to others too. Because now I have more people to talk to about pocket watches.
I think that's great. Who doesn't love a pocket watch? And at a time when everyone's sitting at their desks, I think
That's true.
now's as good a time to get into pocket watches as ever. I want to ask you about another slightly unusual watch that I believe you and Eric Wind were also involved with. One that was auctioned in 2015 called the Pearl of Bahrain. Now, I'm interested in this for a particular reason. It's a sort of an unusual watch, as I'm sure you can describe, but it also attracted a very unexpected price. Do you think this sort of watch would perform as well or better today, or have our tastes become more homogenous? Is this too much of a stylistic outlier?
I think this is a watch that had a very geographical flavor to it. And I remember it was Eric Wynn's. I think this was one of his first consignments. He was looking through some old appraisal sheets when he just joined Christie's, and I remember him showing me the piece of paper. He was like, John, look at this," and he knew exactly what to do. He contacted the owner. He dug deep, and he was able to get this watch for consignment. Um, it brought extraordinary price. I can't remember, a few $100,000, I believe.
I think what stood out to me was I think it had an estimate of around 10,000, and it pulled
Yes,
in around 400,000.
What?
incredible. Yeah, the estimate was like $10,000 to $15,000. But it was a pure coincidence. It was being sold. I think we found out in like an hour before the auction on Bahraini National Day, and
Oh,
the phones we had, every single phone was full. I think we had every watch collector from Bahrain was on the phone with one of the specialists, and we were just all fighting with each other, with the clients on the phone until the hammer went down, and it was a piece that was given as a gift to this to an American, and once Eric rediscovered it, it's now part of an important collection, has a wonderful new home.
That's
And that's the
amazing.
best part
That's
about auction. You just never know what's going to happen next. It's an unpredictable universe of highs and lows.
I love it, and I think that extends onto the watch world. It's a pretty weird and wacky place, and you meet a lot of interesting people. Someone who you've met and I understand you've got a bit of a relationship with, who is a bit of a white whale within the watch world, Ed Sheeran. So, you've had him as a bit of a feature on your site. I imagine you met him through Patek, being a bit of a fan, but that's pretty cool. How did that all come about with Ed?
He very kindly agreed to do that interview when I was launching the site Collectability. I was absolutely shocked that he agreed to it, and grateful. He's a passionate watch collector who has diverse interests across categories. He works very closely with others in the watch world in finding some incredible pieces. And most recently, he has a new apple of his eye. He has a daughter, and obviously he's not touring, and he's
Yep.
he's all dad all the time, and I couldn't be happier for him. He's absolutely not only a brilliant musician, he's a brilliant collector, and I expect he has many years of collecting ahead of him, and that's unbelievable. So
I'm sure he'll be flattered when he hears this.
we know he'll
And
listen to
he's a
every.
listener, yeah.
Yeah,
So
of course he's gonna
he'll
regram
check.
it. No doubt he's gonna regram
Yeah,
this
he comments. He comments
podcast.
after every episode. It's amazing.
That's very impressive.
He's really interesting. He's a really interesting guy, and I mean, obviously, you had the interview with him, and Hodinky had a bit of an open letter, and I love that he's so sort of private with the way that he goes about doing what he does, and just moves quietly through the shadows of the watch community as best he can. I mean, he's got the Patek that I think Bamford did for him, George did for him many years ago. It would have been now, which I think is really cool, all the way through to sort of those vintage pieces that we see him wearing, to sort of the newer pieces through to like Richard Mille. So it seems like he's got a very, very cool approach to watch collecting. We'll definitely link up the short interview you did with him on your site. I think that's making quite the splash to launch a new business.
It's incredible. I recently did we were just looking at the end of the year numbers of who was visiting my website, like just assessing traffic. I'm new to all of this, but just basically assessing who was looking at all of the articles, and I was absolutely sure that the Ed Sheeran would be number one. But there was another gentleman whose interview that absolutely took first place, and Ed Sheeran was a distant second, and that's no other than Patekaholic,
Wow.
also known as Jasm Zarahi. And this is an interesting thing, because it shows how in the world of COVID, people want in-depth interviews, and they took their time to read that. I think it was a 6,000 word interview with Jasm. So it's interesting how just in media is changing in general, where sound bites aren't generating the connection as much as in-depth media. So apparently you two are on the right path.
Hopefully, but
Well
but
done.
While we're sort of talking about it, and I know sort of we mentioned it at the start, but maybe what is collectability? Is it like an information site or a sales platform? What is it, and where do you hope to be taking it?
Sure. So ultimately, it's a sales platform of watches that I buy and sell. But it's not fully transactionary. It's also there for educational purposes. I feel an educated consumer is the best consumer. So I'm really focusing on content. We have a lot of exciting things planned for this year, so people can learn more, dive deep, see things that they might have overlooked in the past, and at the same time, you find something that's interesting you're learning about. Of course, you could buy something. So it's not a website that's information first. It's obviously transactional, so people know what they're coming into when they visit the site. But I also put prices on all the watches that are offered, so people can kind of get a feel for what things bring. I leave all the pieces that I've sold on the site, so people can get a feel for what types of things are available on the market. And it's very dynamic. I mean, every day things are changing on the website, and I have great fun working on that with my small team. And there's going to be more soon to be announced. Will be coming out on collectability in terms of education, and I think I'm finding the right balance of the educational and the transactional nature, which is always the challenge today in today's world, to find that balance.
Yeah, I love that. Well, speaking of pricing, one piece I missed out on, unfortunately, is a Patek Solar clock from the 1950s. What is this? I'd never seen one before.
It's such a cool piece. I just finished filming a YouTube video that I had to feature that clock, and it's going to a very happy home in the Midwest America. This particular piece is one of the first dome clocks that was ever made. They're very commonly compared to R2D2 because they have the same shape. But the point is simple. That dome on the top swivels. So if it's on your desk, you just swivel the solar panel towards the window so it can get sunlight or towards the light source because any type of light works with those. But Patek Philippe's history with solar timekeeping is often forgotten, but it exploded in the 1950s and throughout the 1980s became a core part of their business. So I buy a lot of clocks. Admittedly, I don't sell a lot because I love them. Like right now, I'm sitting in my office. I have a whole lineup. Gosh, we got to be 10 clocks right here, and that's fine. If I never sell them, I'm absolutely fine with that because I love them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe clocks. Maybe it's going to be clocks years next after pocket watches.
Desk clocks.
Oh, gee.
Maybe. Like it looks good. It looks really cool as like a bookshelf or an ornament piece. Like I see value. What did you sell that for, if you don't mind me asking?
That was $30,000 for that
Okay.
early dome clock with the original box. So
It's a lot of clock for the money, I guess. I mean, I've always maybe not Patek, but I've always somewhere on my list I'd like to get an Atmos at some time. So
yes,
clocks.
exactly. But you can buy a Patek solar clock for under $5,000 too, and people just they just don't know that these exist. And the other
Well, we better
cool
buy
thing
some now
is,
before we
yeah,
release
buy
this
them now.
episode.
Yeah, go out there.
Head to
buy 'em up.
collectability.com and
The other thing that people don't realize is all the early versions have a pocket watch inside of them. The hour hand and the minute hand are actually moved by a pocket watch that's mounted horizontally. The solar power is only in conjunction with an accumulator taking a motor and winding the pocket watch to tell the time. So they tick like a pocket watch. Aesthetically, they're finished. It's a Patek Philippe 17 line caliber. There's just a story that hasn't been fully told, and people think of them as they're kind of outliers in the collectible world. But we'll see. People will
very cool.
pick up on them.
Now we've sort of we've talked about it a little bit, but I want to having somewhat of your sort of experience on. I want to sort of get your take on the growth over the last 30 or so years of the auction space. It's gone from being every so often having a watch or a pocket watch or a clock in with the jewelry lots to being a massively important independent business in the auction space. Why is this the case?
Wow. I remember like in the 90s, we knew our place compared to other departments.
Sure.
The jewelry department was much higher in the food chain than the watch department, which was lucky to even have an office in the building. And then it went all the way up to the art departments, which call the shots. I mean, that's where the core business is. But things have really changed recently, and especially over the last 12 months as the world has seemingly gone upside down. Where I'm hearing from my friends in the auction world that in many cases, the watch business is helping drive the overall business of the auction houses because it's the one thing they can sell online. Sotheby's, for example, has constant online auctions. And when in the heart of it all, last spring, when everything was shutting down for the first time, these auctions were just really just driving some significant business to Sotheby's. And Christie's was right there. Amazingly, Phillips continued to do live sales, and the results speak for themselves. They're simply extraordinary. But the amount of press, the amount of high-profile collectors, the amount of excitement that watch collecting is bringing. It doesn't eclipse the art world, but it will, and it seems to be doing the job quite well.
Really?
So we're in a new era. I think what we're going to see over the next 10 years is going to be extraordinary. It's I think the amount of people interested in the age demographics is so spread. The rise of Asian collectors is frankly all that matters now. Especially young collectors out of mainland China who are obsessed with many brands, including Patek Philippe. Their taste and interest are going to drive prices to previously unknown numbers. That's my maybe perhaps optimistic prediction, but it seems to be happening in front of our very eyes.
Wow. And you mentioned, like, I'm still getting over the fact that you think that the watches will outstrip art as a category. That's a bold claim, and I want to see it happen.
Well, if we talk about raw numbers,
Yeah.
I also have to back that up. I mean, if you take the whole vintage and pre-owned watch world, it's arguably bigger than the vintage and pre-owned car world. There's a lot of cars out there. So this is the billions in this business is extraordinary. What we see at auction is just a tiny little sliver of something much bigger that's happening. So the art world, which is primarily focused, I mean, I think it's over 50% of what we see in the art world at auction is the art world in terms of dollars. That's rather finite in comparison to the watch world. So, yeah, the art world has some competition now.
Yeah, I guess Patek made a lot more watches than Van Gogh painted.
Well said.
Yes,
as the saying goes, the famous saying goes.
that's as my grandmother said to me.
If only Van Gogh was a watchmaker.
The other thing, sort of, that ties into this for me, certainly looking at it from an outsider perspective over the last few years, it seems to be like there's this rise of not just the high profile auctions, like these sort of, the big celebrity backed lots, and the Geneva auctions seem to be becoming more and more important. But there's also the sort of the cult of personality around auctioneers as characters in this space. Is this unique to watches? And do you think it's a good thing for the market to have these sort of ambassadors?
Wow, that is such a good question. Traditionally, the art world has always had its celebrity auctioneers. The fact that the watch world has it, I mean, we can only talk about the one and only Aurel Box. He is, in any category, one of the best auctioneers we've ever seen. His ability with languages and engaging the audience, I mean, just firing up bidders online, phone, and in person. I've never seen an auctioneer that is magical or create the magic like Aurel does. And he did it at Sotheby's, he did it at Christie's, and then, of course, what he's doing at Phillips now. So if you haven't watched him online, I think everyone has at this point. He's just fun to watch auctioneer. He's the maestro at that. So is that good for the market? Wow, that is a tough question. So, it's good for the seller if they just sold a watch 3 times higher than they expected. The buyer, once they pay the invoice, they might beg to differ, because you see, great auctioneers can always get every last bid out of a bidder. And for those of you who've done online bidding, whether it's on eBay or with a live auction, it's so easy to click one more time. And I was always scared when people involve drinking and clicking. It's a bad combination. And in many occasions, I saw people just having a nice drink at night, sitting at their computer, clicking away, and they might have regretted what they've done the next morning. There's probably some jokes there, but I'll just leave you with that imagery. So the bottom line is a great auctioneer now needs not only engage with a live audience, they need to engage with an online audience, and those with the most charisma and knowledge, connection, trust are going to be the best auctioneers. But I don't think it manipulates or messes the market in any way, because it's such a small part of the overall market. What we see at auction is just a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, fascinating. All right, John. Well, I have one more question before we sort of move on to the last little section. And if I'm on the line to the world's leading, the authority on Patek, and he's connected, he knows everyone, he knows everything, nearly. What's the dream piece for you? What is the absolute, Grail Patek that you want but haven't been able to get?
Wow. I just had the pleasure of buying we'll call it my modern Holy Grail. Then I'll get my vintage Holy Grail. I very much
Uh-huh.
wanted a platinum 5738, the jumbo ellipse with a Tiffany dial,
Nice.
and not an easy watch to find. And I mean, I love Tiffany dials. I think it's a little insane right now what's happening with Tiffany dials. But I figured with the ellipse, where I'm one of the few people in the world obsessed with them, I needed to find one with a Tiffany dial, and I finally did. And in fact, that's what I'm wearing today. I love this watch. Um, on the vintage front, that is really difficult to say. But two grails come to mind. First is the missing Graves super complication, um, which I've described on my site. You want to see the whole story? There's one that's just missing that I'm determined to find while I'm still on this earth. The funny thing is, we don't know if it still even exists, but we know where the box and papers are. The second piece, and this is beyond quirky, but something that I've always wanted to own, is a Patek Philippe singing bird box. Um, and in the 1860s, when Americans in particular were on the Grand Tour of Europe, they'd go to Geneva and they'd buy some amazing watch or objet to bring home. And the richest of the rich were able to afford something called a bird box. And Patek Philippe, they made less than 2 dozen of these during that period. And what they are these beautiful silver or gold cases that have often enamel watch on the front cover, a Patek Philippe watch, of course. And then you push a button on the side, and a little bird pops out from a secret lid on top of the bird box and sings a song, sings a tune. The bird is actually made out of real feathers. The beak is actually a real beak of a poor little bird that died 160 years ago, and it sings a song with bellows. This isn't Grandma's cuckoo clock, I assure you. It's something that's magical. Um, so yes, so if anyone has one of those, let me know.
How many of them have sort of made the market in the past?
You see them appear, at least 7 or 8 have appeared. Phillips sold one. They tend to bring millions now, depending on condition. Very very competitive when we see these pop up.
Do you want
Well,
one of
not
those?
millions. Actually, that's a little aggressive. So if I'm
A
A couple
looking to
hundred
buy,
thousand, it looks like one.
yeah, if
Yeah,
I'm looking to buy, I should say they bring tens of thousands.
they're
No one wants it.
overpriced. Yeah,
Nobody wants them.
for just a box,
Now,
10 grand. Yeah.
now, my question is: do you want one that's already been to market, or do you want a fresh to market one?
Oh, fresh to market's always the dream doing what we
Okay.
do, and same with collectors. So, and I don't have to worry about the watch being on someone's wrist, because this is the ones that we're still looking for are sitting in safe deposit boxes somewhere, and when they do appear, they're often very very well preserved.
Amazing. Now, the last thing we're going to ask you has nothing at all to do with watches. Uh,
Oh no.
I know. We just want to know what you've been doing to pass the time. Have you been reading a book? Have you been watching a TV series? Have you been listening to podcasts? What would you recommend to our listeners?
Wow. Well, first is going to be something very, it's somewhat personal, but we're all friends here. We now are owners of a dog, and this has changed our lives. I've never been a dog person. I never imagined I'd own a dog, but my wife convinced me, and my kids absolutely love our golden retriever, and like every spare minute belongs to him. Um, Now, if you haven't had a pet, now's the time, right? So,
Yeah.
so that's just the first thing that comes to mind. But what I spend if I have spare minutes, it's as a dad, and frankly, that's top priority. And for the first time in my life over the past year, I've had dinner with the family almost every day for 12 months. That is a gift I've never had, because I was always on the road 75% of the time. So when you're not obsessing over watches or reading about them online or talking to watch friends, well, put that as a secondary priority to your family.
That's amazing.
That's a message that's so important, because all that matters is the next generation.
I love that. Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. We really appreciate it. It's been a blast to have you on, and I'm sure we'll have to ring you up next time something big rattles the Patek market.
Oh, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Felix. This is an absolute pleasure.
It's lovely chatting.
Well, if part 2 is anything to go by, I can't wait to have John back on for part 3. Felix, what a lovely fellow. What a great chat. I'm definitely going to get him back on for some hot takes later in the year, especially with Watches and Wonders coming up.
Do you know what you said at the start? You sort of walk away from chatting to him feeling a little bit inadequate and not knowing enough. I sort of go away with the opposite. I go away learning something and feeling, like I've got something out of it. I find it a really positive chat, because he doesn't, beat you over the head with his expertise of Patek Philippe. Like, he's just a really nice person. Anyway, that's my late in the piece diatribe done. Who do we need to thank?
This week's episode sponsor, Casio G-Shock, of course. And while we're thanking people, Major Tom Media for pulling the show together. And of course the listeners and all those people giving us 5-star reviews on iTunes.
If you want to email us about our incessant plugging for 5-star reviews on iTunes, you can do that at otthepodcast@gmail.com. You could also share the content on your social media, tagging ot.podcast on Instagram. That would be a nice thing to do.
That'd be lovely.
And, I mean, what are we going to do now? Let's do something else, Andy. Let's talk about your secret new watch.
So I bought this